Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NorthStar Community online service and in person as well. If you're here today listening to me, we figure at some level you're in some level of recovery. And so it's so great to have everybody with us. Today we're going to talk about the law of human gravity. And another way to say this is prolonging the inevitable. So I'm going to read I remember this poem from my college days, and it's a shocking, stunning poem because it has such a surprise to it. It's called Richard Cory. It's by Edwin Arlington Robinson. He wrote this in 1893. It was actually the first year of the panic that hit us, in an economic panic that hit the United States, kind of ended in 1897. So let me read this to you, and it's an indictment of us as a society and, of course, us in our recovery. So whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from sole to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. But still he fluttered pulses when he said, "Good morning," and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything, to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked and waited for the light, and went without the meat and cursed the bread. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. So that's one of those stunning poems you don't expect to have at the end there. But it's such an indictment of us is in recovery and as a society, and there's so many things we could take from this poem. So Richard Cory, there's a couple of indictments there. One is us as a society. We look upon people like him and we think, oh, he's got everything together and he's so perfect and his life is just so wonderful, when in fact it isn't. And so we know that, one of the things we talk about all the time in recovery is that we are as sick as our secrets. Obviously, Richard Cory had stuff going on in his life that he wasn't telling anybody about. But also us as people, we tend to envy others. We tend to see others with their lives are so good, and we think they've got it so together, and we don't, and we're just so awful, and blah, blah, blah. So Richard Cory is a great poem to wake us up, to see how we make assumptions about people that aren't correct in both ways. So I'm going to read Paul now from 2 Corinthians 12. And again, for you that don't know who Paul is a revered Christian writer. He actually became a Christian evangelist right after Christ was crucified and resurrected. And so he went from being someone who persecuted Jesus to being one who served Jesus. And so he's talking about, we don't really know exactly what he had, but he had some form of a physical handicap that we don't know what it was, but it was tough. He didn't like it. And so Paul's writing about this in 2 Corinthians. So he goes, because of the extravagance of those revelations, and so I wouldn't get a big head, I was given the gift of a handicap to keep me in constant touch with my limitations. Satan's angel did his best to get me down, and what he in fact did was push me to my knees. No danger then of walking around high and mighty. At first I didn't think of it as a gift and begged God to remove it. 3 times I did that, and then he told me, my grace is enough, it's all you need. My strength comes into its own in your weakness. Once I heard that, I was glad to let it happen. I quit focusing on the handicap and began appreciating the gift. It was a case of Christ's strength moving in on my weakness. Now I take limitations in stride, and with good cheer, these limitations that cut me down to size, abuse, accidents, opposition, bad breaks, I just let Christ take over. And so the weaker I get, the stronger I become. That is such a great recovery scripture for us, because we just want things to be, the problem in our society, as being an affluent society, is that we think that everything should just work out, and it doesn't. And when things don't work out, we become depressed, and we wonder what we've done wrong, and we get angry and all those things. When the fact is, life is full of trials and tribulations, and it's how we choose to do that. So we're going to talk about the law of human gravity today. So for many of us, We understand this. So some of us have had this said to us, or we've said it to loved ones, and we say, if you don't stop, you're going to lose your job. If you don't stop, you're going to lose your family. If you don't stop, you're going to lose your health. If you don't stop, you're going to die. And we hear that, and we go, okay, I got you, right? And people, and then I kind of get amused when people go, I just don't understand how people think that way. Well, I think all of us have this at some level. But the law of human gravity is that it is harder for us to live sober, to live without our hurts, habits, and hang-ups, than it is to live with them. That's what we hope for. The fact is with the law, but the problem for most of us is it's far easier to live with our addictions than it is to live without them, no matter the consequences. So always want to remind ourselves when we talk about this, it's easy to think about drugs and alcohol with this, but think about all the stuff we do where we get stuck in compulsive behaviors, where we can't stop, where we know it's destroying our lives if we don't stop, but we can't. Or we continue to find ourselves acting compulsively or addictively with people, either trying to give ourselves up so someone will love us, or we live our lives for external validation from others, all those things. The point is, it's what we have to figure out is what can we do to switch the law of human gravity. So if for us, the addicts, again, we understand this. It is so hard to not live our lives addictively. The problem is that we loathe ourselves. We see ourselves as failures. We see ourselves as bad. We see ourselves as unimportant, unvaluable, whatever words we want to use. And so it's really hard for us to overcome that. And so it's just easier to forget about ourselves. So a lot of times, when we talk about addiction, what we're talking about is habitual behavior to avoid pain. I mean, that's what we do because we do not want to face life. We do not want to face the realities of our life. And so then we do all these things just to not feel, just not to face it. Well, then you go and you get to some sort of recovery, and they tell you got to face your pain. You've got to figure out a way to look at what's causing all this pain in your life and deal with it. So I've been spending most of my life finding ways not to deal with my pain, to avoid it, and then you go into recovery, and it's really hard to do. So maybe this message is maybe a little bit more pointed towards the family members and friends of people who are destroying their lives. Because us that are destroying our lives through drugs, alcohol, compulsive behaviors, relationships, and people, we understand. It's so painful. We understand how we got here. And we can talk about, we talk about, for the majority of us, we had childhood trauma, we had childhood abandonment. We were neglected. We lived in a household of addicts. We lived in a household of abuse, or if we didn't have that, we had parents who abandoned us. They weren't there for us emotionally. They weren't there for us because of all the things going on. I mean, think about Richard Cory. Richard Cory in his poem, we saw him as he had everything. But we don't know. We don't know what his childhood was like. We don't know whether maybe his dad was wealthy and he was so busy out there creating wealth, he didn't have time for Richard, and maybe even despised Richard. We don't know. Maybe his mother was an addict. Maybe she never was there. We just don't know. Maybe he was sexually abused. The list can go on and on. But for us that are in recovery, we understand it because we've been through a lot of this. And so the problem is, what happens in our childhood is we ask the question, what's wrong with me? We can't think about the fact that our parents are flawed, that our parents are having issues. So we kind of go with, what's wrong with me? And if we don't ever do anything about it, the problem is that we loathe ourselves. We grow to despise ourselves. We see ourselves as weak and stupid and angry and all the stuff we do. So, of course, we believe in recovery. This is about awareness. And then ultimately about forgiveness, about forgiving ourselves. If we can understand what post-traumatic stress disorder does to us, and even worse, the complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which means we were in an abusive environment for an ongoing time period and we couldn't get away, we have to see how it affects us. We have to understand what it does to our self-image and how it destroys who we see ourselves as. And we have to do two things here. We have to forgive ourselves and we have to forgive others. And I think sometimes it's almost harder to forgive ourselves than it is others. And so the problem is, it's do we give up or do we get up? That's really what it comes down to. And of course, we talk about all the time is that you need to get healthy people in your life. And also, hopefully, you can find a spiritual side to your life where you believe in a God that loves you, that has forgiven you, that is there for you. It doesn't matter what we've done in the past, God loves us. So the law of human behavior, I'm going to quote Dr. Tversky here in his book, Addictive Thinking. A law of human behavior that appears as absolute as the law of gravity might well be called the law of human gravity. A person will gravitate from a condition that appears to be one of greater distress to a condition that appears to be one of lesser distress, and never in the reverse direction. So again, you're going to die if you keep doing this. You're going to lose your job if you keep doing this. You're going to lose your family if you keep doing this, and we still can't stop. That's what we're talking about. And we have to understand it again, that what we're doing is we're trying to avoid the pain and the awareness of what happened to us in our childhood, our early adulthood. And the whole thing we have to do here is we have to figure out a way to change the perception that what we're doing in our hurts, habits, and hang-ups is creating more pain than if we stop. And that is so hard to do. I know people, you probably know people who know they've got to stop. I've had heroin addicts in my office say to me, I know this is killing me, but as soon as I leave here, I'm going to go use. Or I know people who are in terribly destructive relationships, and they go, I'm just going to try one more time. I'm going to forgive them. I'm going to just one more time. I think it can work. If I just do all these things right, maybe it'll work. But it doesn't. The only way this works is for us to become aware of our hurts, our habits, and our hang-ups and what they're doing to us. And instead of hiding from them and judging ourselves, we accept it as part of recovery. So what we have to come up with, how do we switch this law of human gravity from it's easier to use and live destructively than it is to not use and to not live destructively? It sounds so simple, doesn't it? It sounds like just something you do. But the fact is, it's not simple at all. It's very difficult. And what we have to do is we have to figure out that critical combination. When do we hit that point where our pain is high enough, in fact, too high, that we can't live with that anymore and we have to change? That's when it happens. And I hate to say this, but the only way this is going to happen is through pain. You cannot and will not recover until you face your pain. So I say this to friends and family. Every time you intervene, every time you help, every time you bail them out, every time you make excuses for addicts, and addicts again include substances, compulsive behaviors, and broken relationships. Every time that I do something to keep someone, a loved one or a friend or ourselves from facing the pain, all we're doing is prolonging the inevitable. We're well-meaning when we do it. We think if we can create some fail-safes, maybe they'll get it this time. Maybe this time I'm going to give them $100. I'm going to let them, this will be their last time. They've promised me. They say they're going to go to rehab. They say they're going to get off the computer. They say they're not going to go back to that person that's destroying their lives. And of course they do, or we do, I should say. So what we have to do, there's this crazy thing called trust God, let God do his work. Every time that we intervene, we're getting in the way of the inevitable process of addiction. Without intervention, that meaning us enabling, addiction will take its course. Now, unfortunately, sometimes that can be pretty awful. I agree. But you know what? I always tell people, and I always tell people who are a loved one who's destroying them, I'll say, 911 can be your best friend. And they always go, oh, I couldn't do that to them. I couldn't make them go to jail. I go, they're killing themselves now. They can't stop. Or I'll tell parents when they have a loved one in their house who's addicted to substances, I'll say, make sure you lock up all your heirlooms. Make sure you get your cash, get it hidden. Because if you don't, well, they're already stealing from you, but if you don't, they'll steal more. I don't know the number of families who have said to me, they would never do that to us. They would never take our money. They would never take grandma's ring and sell it at a pawn shop. And guess what? They're down at the pawn shop trying to get the ring back. When we become, as you know, people out here listening, when we're addicted, we care about one thing. It's our addiction. I always tell people, if you really want to understand addiction, well, first of all, look at your life because you got something. But if you really want to understand addiction, just watch a zombie movie. There's not a better example for addiction. A zombie cares about one thing, that's eating your brains. An addict cares about one thing, to get their addiction taken care of that day. And again, just so you don't think, sometimes, again, we immediately go to heroin or meth or cocaine. But I know people who are destroying their lives every day because they can't get off their computers, because they can't get off looking at sites. They can't get off social media. They can't quit worrying about how many people are looking at their stuff, and it destroys their lives. I know people who've lost their jobs because they look at porn till 3 in the morning. Well, eventually, you got to sleep. I know people have lost their whole careers and everything else with gambling. I mean, it's all out there. And good Lord, a number of people I know I always kid about is in their 33rd broken relationship, thinking that this is going to be the one, and they live so addictively. I tell people who are in those broken relationships, I always tell them to put the song Cocaine on as their ringtone so that when that person calls or texts them, that will come on, because that's how addicted they are. We believe that we're going to make that one magical text and the person's going to get it. Or we believe, well, they beat me up last night, but, they were drunk and they were sad and I caused some of it. No, that's all addictive behavior, guys. The best thing we can do, and the only thing we can do, is stop prolonging the inevitable. Now, I wish it was easy. I wish it was that easy, of course. Because one of the problems I tell people all the time in NorthStar, we get along really good in there. But the one area where we really do struggle with, when do I stop supporting and when do I stop enabling? If we could answer that question, we'd all be geniuses. We could write books and be billionaires, because there's no easy answer. And as us for us that are addicted, we know we create so many no-win scenarios. Just really are heartbreaking. So the way to look at it here too is, if you're the enabler, don't judge yourself for it, but you got to stop. You're not helping anybody. All you're doing, keep telling yourself this, all you're doing is prolonging the inevitable. Addicts will never stop until their pain's too high. When they have that moment where there's a shift in perception, they will change. I should say we will change. Until that moment comes, it won't happen. That's why people who have recovery in them, maybe been doing it for a while, they'll tell you, I would never take away the awful moments because that's who I am today. And that's what makes me who I am today. So I'm not asking you to forget about all this stuff. I'm just asking you to change your perception. So, well-meaning people, stop prolonging the inevitable. Trust God. Let the process happen. Stop creating fail-safes. Without intervention is the only way we'll get better. Until we do that, we just continue to make the law of human gravity the wrong way. The problem is that Stopping is hard. I'm not giving anybody out here any secret here. Stopping what we do that's destructive in our lives is so, so hard to do. That's why we continue to do it. So make sure you hear that, people out here who are destroying your lives. For you that are saying to yourself, you know, I know this is destroying me. I know I need to quit. I'll start working on it, and 30 days from now, maybe I'll quit. Right? That's not how it works. The only way that we'll change is when we see there might be other alternatives out there. If we can figure out through our pain that the way to take away our pain is to face it and to find ways to recover, we can do that. What are the things, what are or have been the rewards of abstinence for you in the past? Think about it. Be specific. When were those moments where you caught it? You caught a glimpse of what's the rewards of abstinence? And the thing we talk about all the time at NorthStar and other support groups is what have been the reasons for not stopping now? Be specific. Why is it that no matter, I know how bad it is, I can't stop? So the winning combination here for us, oh happy day, is the combination of a rock bottom experience, which means pain, awareness of what's driving us. Most of us, again, with our backgrounds as children, young adults, we've had trauma in our lives, we've had abandonment. So the combination is the rock bottom experience that we have to have, where our pain exceeds use, awareness of what drives this, and then a realistic anticipation of the benefits of abstinence can make sobriety possible. It's one of the reasons to come to support groups is that you can see people who are successfully in recovery. They can give you hope. You can see what they've got that you don't. As long as you understand that at one time they probably were where you were or worse. The other thing is, and I hate to break this to you, but when we become addicted, we become, well, I will say arrogant, but we'll use other words. But we live with bravado, because what we're really doing is we're pushing people away. But I'm going to break it to you. I hate to tell you, you're not that unique and you're not that special. The chances are your story is one that someone in the room's already had and lived. Families, quit hiding. Tell people about it. Quit judging yourself. Quit living in fear. And know that it can get better. But it will not get better as long as you are hiding it, lying about it, enabling it. The day you can talk to other people and say, my best friend's an addict, or I can't get off screen time, I'm on it 8 hours a day. When you start talking about it, the power starts to go away. So the two great lines in recovery are one day at a time, which means, I know how cliche it sounds, but you know what? Maybe today you won't use, you won't do, you won't give yourself up just today. And the other is, we are as sick as our secrets. If we can remember those two, we can move on. When we quit living with secrets, when we quit hiding the pain, when we quit making excuses, when we put our foot down for ourselves and for others, we can get better. So don't let shame, perfectionism, and others' validation stop you. If Richard Corey would have just told somebody his pain, maybe he wouldn't have gone home and put a bullet through his head. But he didn't. He thought he was supposed to look perfect. That's what he did. And we all wanted him to be perfect. And so that's what we did. The fact is, just to hear this, we all have hurts, habits, and hang-ups. Every one of us. Nobody's perfect. God doesn't care. What God wants is our hearts to be to him. God one time in the Old Testament told the prophet Samuel, he says, humans go by appearances. I, as God, know your heart. all you got to do is go to God. Tell him you want to stop. Tell him you're done. Tell him you need strength to get through with your family members. You can't overcome this. And if we can just remember when we go to support groups, I'll quote Tversky here, he says, in the safe confines of fellowship meetings, we truly can begin to dismantle our walls. When we go there, we can better understand and more readily see our addictive behaviors when we're with others who are doing the same thing. I think that's always kind of a surprise to people when they first come in and they see that there's others in there with the same story. It helps. Because then you realize you're not alone. Not saying it's glad other people are in pain and misery, but it sure helps when I'm in pain and misery to see others sharing my story. So we talk about rich, full, meaningful life. How's these for some bullet points here? I can see my high ACE score, my adverse childhood experiences score, as validation that I have resilience. I'm here recovering, putting my past behind me in ways I won't forget, but not hold me back. My feelings of abandonment no longer confuse me, but it's clear and tangible. I can now see myself as valuable and talented. I have realistic expectations of myself and others. I am active and engaged. I live with purpose and meaning. I can accept that life will be equally difficult and beautiful. I am not shocked when either occurs. I know I must feel to live. I do not judge my emotions. Instead, I'm aware of them and take actions to behave properly. I will continue to grow and heal with God's help. I will always have a desire to learn more and experience life. I will be emotionally and healthily available to others. I'm aware of those in my immediate life. I am attentive. I'm unsure of the future, but I am not concerned. I will rely on those closest to me, and I will share their dreams and burdens as they share mine. That's rich, full, meaningful life. So, thank you for joining me today. NorthStar meets on Wednesdays at 6:30 and Friday nights at 6:30 here at Walnut Grove Baptist Church at 7046 Cold Harbor Road, Mechanicsville, Virginia, 23111. If you'd like to contact me, you can call me at 804-746-5081, or you can email me at csimpson@wgva.church. Love to hear from you. We can get better, we can recover, but we have to face our pain. We have to flip the law of human gravity from using is easier than not using, and that is a hard step to take, but we can do it. So we always close NorthStar Community with a prayer of serenity. So if you'd like to join me as I pray this prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever and the next. Amen. So again, thanks for joining, and you can recover. You can do it. Thanks.